Hello and welcome to the currently untitled Destiny podcast, episode 1. Uh, as you can tell, this is what can tell by the title, this is the sort of a first episode in kind of a series I want to do, uh, or at least try and kind of more focus heavily on podcast style, sort of, I would say videos because it's on YouTube, but just kind of focusing more on podcasts kind of thing as a whole. Uh, and this one specifically being a Destiny podcast and sort of talking about what's going on in Destiny and whatnot. I'm sort of aiming in my mind. This is sort of something that I would do once every 2 weeks, just to kind of allow me to kind of work on other stuff and just kind of see how it sort of all fits in. But this is part of a larger set of things I want to sort of try out going forward. So we'll see how it goes. I think there's a lot of sort of experimental things and different things I want to try sort of going forward. And it's kind of as I've been changing my workflow, my approach to how I sort of put together articles and whatever else. And so yeah, it's just sort of we'll see how it goes, really. And so generally, my whole idea with this podcast, obviously this one specifically being on Destiny, is that we're going to be talking about what's kind of happening in the game, kind of what my thoughts are on sort of that, as well as what's upcoming, talking about what the community is talking about, any kind of leaks that are relevant. Ideally, nothing too groundbreaking or too crazy, because I don't really want to discuss any like story related leaks. Is not something I want to cover at all. I actually actively avoid that stuff. Um, but if there's anything that's kind of like hard to avoid and it's kind of a topic of the community, then we'll probably pick up on it. Uh, and I won't spoil anything in the timestamps because this should all be timestamped. Um, I'll also be talking about the most recent This Week in Destiny blog posts, or TWABs, as they were formerly known as, and more. And maybe, depending on how long I end up doing this, maybe we'll branch out into anything marathon related. Maybe this ends up being more of a Bungie focused podcast rather than Destiny, but we'll see, because that's thinking far out, and I haven't even. That's just now. I've kind of thought about that on the spot. So but generally I have like a I'm sort of interested in this idea, and there's other things, other kind of podcast style things I want to do to cover other games as well. Uh, so yeah, keep an eye out for those. So for those listening to this, I assume you're probably into Destiny, and if you're not, then that's cool. You're here, and actually, that's something I'm very curious about. Is well, not only feedback in general, any feedback that you could give would be much appreciated, but also if you're not a Destiny player and you're listening, or you're just curious, that's something I'd like to hear about, and just let me know what you think, and even just any thoughts on Destiny. Just fire away anything really. You can post anything in the comments, really. Post a joke or something. Who knows? So yeah, in today's episode, we'll be covering season of the. I can't even talk. That's a great start to a podcast. When you start talking, like 3 minutes in, already making mistakes. Today, I'll be covering Season of the Deep, as well as its ending that we got last week. Sort of reflecting on some of my previous predictions in an article I posted a few weeks ago, and talking about the recent server issues addressed in the latest This Week in Destiny podcast, as well as a few more things, but we'll get into the nitty gritty when we get there. And so, yeah, first off, I want to talk about where we're at, like Season of the Deep, in terms of the story. And there's actually been quite a bit going on. It's sort of out of nowhere. We had 2 weeks ago, or it was about 2 weeks ago. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks tomorrow ago. We had the cutscene for the Origins of the Witness, which was daylight a while back. I didn't watch it until it was in the game. And then last week we've got the reveal. Again, spoilers. I should suppose this section is this will be spoilers based on what's in the game, which I guess if you've already heard the Witness's Origins cutscene, but I assume you probably already know anyway. I don't know what I'm going on about. But just in case, we'll be talking a bit about the spoilers about the story. And last week we got the sort of I guess the sort of conclusive part of the story for this season. Whether or not there's an epilogue, something towards the end of the season, we'll find out. And we learn that Savathun will likely be returning, or well, I'll say likely, pretty much confirmed to be returning. And these are, I don't know if I was getting ahead of myself or not, but I said on Twitter that I think that these last 2 weeks, I think I said on Twitter, I think these last 2 weeks of story have maybe been two of the best weeks we've gotten in the last year for story in general. I don't say story in general, but just in terms of it just feels like there's a lot more weight behind what we've learned recently, and especially after you have something like Lightfall release where it really isn't as good as it could be, um, or at least I leave a lot to be desired. It feels like these kind of reveals and what we learn are quite exciting. And so for the Witness's origins cutscene, we kind of get an idea of where the Witness is from, it being its sort of its own race, as well as kind of seemingly where the Traveler came from, and then how the Veil links into that, and just kind of like a whole idea for the Witness's motivations. And I think one of the best reveals to me about that whole cutscene was sort of understanding why the Witness's sort of smoky head has all of the faces moving up in it, and it's because it's obviously all of these people and this race or this civilization that's kind of all merged together into this one being. And I think that's awesome. I think that's such a cool. I remember when I first saw it, it was like, oh wow, that's kind of like chilling, that's creepy, and my immediate thought was like, is that like all of the people or the enemies that like the Witness has killed? And I think that could have been cool, but it's interesting to see uh, probably a much more unique and interesting, like kind of idea behind why the Witness looks like that and what all those face or who all those faces are. Um, so yeah, it's a really good cutscene, and I think certainly one of the best in Destiny that we've gotten. I think what the only downside to it is I just wish it was a proper pre-rendered cutscene rather than this kind of like inkblot sort of style. The one that they typically do for a lot of the seasonal stuff, and it's fine. It's a cool it's a cool style in itself. Um, but yeah, it would have been nice to have seen uh a little bit more going on there. Something that, I mean, I guess my hope is that with the final shape, they're gonna sort of, they're gonna have that cutscene exist in some form, but it's gonna be in like the pre-rendered nature. But then they did confirm on Twitter that that cutscene will actually be viewable in the game after this year concludes, which is interesting. I was actually thinking if that's just a one-off where that's going to sit in the game, or are they going to add a cutscene viewer that maybe allows us to view all of the previous cutscenes from previous expansions, which I think that'll be interesting, because I mean people also like going back to old cutscenes so they can see their character in different scenes and stuff. But I also it makes me curious, because obviously if you do something like that, well, you have to put them all in the game unless they're going to somehow allow you to stream the cutscenes to the game from it. Who knows, really? But that's cool that it's going to be in the game. I'm just curious to know where that's going to sort of sit in the map and in the menus. Yeah, and then outside of that, the following week, which was last week now, we learned that Savathun is returning, and that we're going to need to resurrect her to be able to learn how to go through the portal and follow the Witness to wherever it goes. And that was an awesome reveal, I'll be honest. Like that last mission that we had, where they were sort of the Sivu Wrath they were trying to take Asa, and sort of going in, and the mission wasn't anything crazy, but I still think it was just a really cool, the dialogue was really good, and then of course, the reveal at the end of Savathun coming back is really cool, and it's nice having a cutscene, and I don't actually believe that cutscene was data mined. I don't know if that was because it was kind of unlocked or added as part of the update on that day. But yeah, didn't seem like it was, as far as I know, it wasn't data mined anyway. Who knows if it actually was? I feel like I would have seen a little bit more, because I've not seen spoilers about the Witness's origin cutscene, but I've seen people talking about it. It's been, for the several weeks leading up to it, people kept, every now and again you would see something on it, and I saw that I did actually, to be fair, I did see recommended video on YouTube. It was like, oh, Witness's origin cutscene, so I knew something like that, but I didn't obviously know what the content was and what was in it. But yeah, so it was cool with Savathun's coming back, and the one interesting thing actually in that mission, I don't know if this is just them reusing assets from elsewhere, but there's actually some stairs that look like it leads into a pyramid. I think it's before. I think you have to you drop into the final room through like a hole in the ground or something, or you fall down. And before that, if you turn to your right, there's a sort of steps leading into that. Else, I think I saw someone in the Twitch chat say, "Oh, maybe that's for the exotic quest," and I actually think that's a really good suggestion or sort of prediction or sort of guess. I think that actually sounds like it could be true. And we'll get into more of the exotic quest stuff later, because we are supposedly getting an exotic quest this season, which I also think was data mined. But but we don't actually know when it's going to be in the game. I think there was something about it being in week 10, but it feels like we're building up to it now, and we're in week 6. I think we've just had. So yeah, I don't really know what'll be going on there, but yeah, I actually think so. I'm gonna get into some of my thoughts on this sort of season overall. I think this season's actually been I think the last 2 weeks have been really good story wise, and that actually applies. I will say that not in, I hadn't planned to talk about it, but the lore that we're getting in the Veil containment area for Lightfall, that is a uh that lore's been really interesting, and it's annoying having to wait like every week for that. But the story there is actually really well put together and very good voice acting as well. Learning about I think it's Chioma Essie and Maya Sundaresh, and having well, listening to Osiris and Nimbus sort of decrypt what's going on there. Just some really good, really strong dialogue, and it's really a shame that that wasn't more integrated as part of Lightfall overall, because that I think that aspect of the story would have been just an awesome story to sort of learn about, and it's really good. Um, and yeah, as I said, the last 2 weeks of story have been really good. Quite a bit of lore and delightful stuff, and then quite a bit of sort of cool events, and and also one thing that's really good about this Savathun reveal is that we get to see all of, like so many characters' reactions to it. All the characters are almost like frustrated and almost like arguing because they're like, "No, we can't do this. Like, what do we?" And I love that. I love that something happens. We get to see the characters' reactions, and it feels like it makes sense because it's such a big reveal that's like, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. This is I mean, this was sort of prediction, to be fair, that people had that something would return, but it's just so cool to have it build up, have that reveal, and then have like the reaction from everyone afterwards, and this sort of that now we're anticipating what's going to happen next, whether or not it'll happen this season, whether it'll be next season, whether it will take the entire next season to kind of resurrect Savathun, which I'm sort of hoping not. I'm hoping that that'll be like the first mission, that we're going to have. It's going to be resurrecting Savathun, and it's going to be working with her, for, in some way to sort of, I don't know, to learn or to gain her trust or something like that. Whether we can even trust Savathun, of course, but I think that'll be one of the things where it's like no one trusts Savathun, but she'll actually we'll be working together, and I actually really like this was something I sort of predicted, which I'll get into in a minute, that we would work with Savathun as like a last ditch effort to sort of like, because we don't know where else to go to find answers, to be able to follow the witness, which I was expecting that to be in the last season of the year, but which I guess could be if they take all season next season to resurrect her, but I'm really hoping that's not the case. I really hope that it's going to be, the story's going to be moving that fast. It's like, no, we're resurrecting her straight away, and you'll be straight into the story. That's what I really hope. So yeah, I think the last 2 weeks have been good. I think overall though, the first 4 weeks, I don't really think were anything to write home about. I mean, as far as I remember, I don't think there was anything actually happened that was crazy or interesting really in those first few weeks. A lot of good character development, as always, but I mean, like this is where I haven't like properly researched into it, but I don't recall knowing why Titan has returned. Uh, there's a few things like that I'm sort of still hazy on. And as I said, I just don't know if it wasn't, like I said, the season's not been bad, but it's not been anything crazy other than the last 2 weeks where it finally feels like it's like, yes, okay, we're really we're getting somewhere now. And so just to kind of like cap this off, yeah, while I think the sort of season story hasn't been anything crazy, I actually think that the gameplay side of the season has been not amazing, but I actually think there's not enough people giving it credit for what it's doing, to be honest. Like, even though it's very basic, I probably won't go too deep into my thoughts overall now because we've still got other things like Solstice to come. We don't know why. We've got the Exotic Quest yet to sort of come into the game, and so there's a bit to sort of to sort of see it in that regard. But I think the season's been alright, and I think why I say people aren't giving it enough credit, it's more in regards to the kind of like elements where it's like, like they've added fishing, and there's the fact that there's the underwater gameplay, and both of them are really basic. Like the fishing is literally just you hold square or whatever your action button is, and you press it at the right time to catch it, and if you miss it, you lose your bait and you lose the fish, kind of thing. And there's several rarities, several fish, and you can bank them in your aquarium in the helm, and you get to kind of collect them. And it's kind of very basic, and obviously there's a whole set of sort of weapons, the reprised Gambit Prime weapons, or is it Reckoning? Sorry, well, Gambit Prime, Reckoning, I think pretty much one and the same. Yeah, you get those from there, and I think I've got one. I think I've got all but one, or maybe I have all of them now. I'm not too sure. But it seems like Zer's actually been selling them as well, which is funny. So you can actually get them from there. Uh, yeah, and then in terms of the underwater stuff, it's like again, it's really basic. You just go under the water and you collect bubbles to keep your oxygen up, and obviously the dungeon has a lot more of that, much like the salvage, not salvage, sorry, deep dives has that, quite a bit of that. But I just think, to me, it's like sure it's basic, but it's something new, and it does make the game feel a little bit more fresh than I think other seasons did. And I felt the same with Season of the Haunted last year when they had the Leviathan as a patrol zone. I thought that was a really cool, a unique idea. I'm like, it was cool that we got something different. It's a different approach for a seasonal sort of structure, and everyone still says, "Oh yeah, season's always the same," though, and it's like, well, yeah, I wouldn't disagree, but I'm also like, this is still more than we're used to. Usually it's just like, oh, it's Battlegrounds again, or it's like, oh, it's an upgrade grid again, and it's and I'm like, I don't know what people expect sometimes, but I'm like, actually, I think the season's been pretty good when it comes to that side. Though I will say, Salvage, I've only played about 4 or 5 times. I don't think Salvage is very good. I think deep dives are really cool. Uh, Salvage, I feel like just has weird level design. It doesn't funnel the enemies towards you very well. There are barely any enemies to attack. Um, I like the whole thing of like, oh, you're repairing parts of Titan or part of the machinery and things like that, and I like the almost open ended thing, like sort of nature to it, but it feels really kind of weird. I'm curious to know where this started. I do wonder, because to me it feels like a patrol zone thing. It feels like a public event activity, and they chose to make it into a match made activity. Which I say that, but then it has like its own bespoke sort of boss arena and things like that. So I don't really know. And actually, I will say, you have two bosses. You have the first one, which is in like the kind of sort of circular room where you have to stand on the plates to get the right symbols, that was cool because that's a different kind of mechanic that we've seen in a boss for match made content, I believe. And then the other boss uses the mechanic where you have to stand and shoot the boss in the back, which I believe was only, I think, I don't say it's only done, but I'm pretty sure primarily it was done in Last Wish, against Morgoth, I think is the boss's name. And yeah, I just thought that was a cool approach. It's cool that they're mixing up the match made content a little bit more, and I actually quite like the boss arena for that one. Even it's a more open room, but you've got kind of like pillars that you've got like the taken hobgoblins or whatever, like sniping you from. At least I think it was hobgoblins, or maybe it was like acolytes with snipers or something. I don't know. But then you've got like tons of enemies on the ground, and you've got like the boss. It's kind of like chasing you around, and then you have like another boss show up, which isn't as strong, but it's still. I just felt like that one. Not that I've played it too many times, but it just felt. It's interesting because I always have an issue when you have like really open areas with not much going on in them. But this actually felt like a really nice use of that space because the boss is so big, it kind of fills that space and it keeps you moving. Honestly, it was it was a kind of boss room that I don't think we've seen really in Destiny. Usually there are. I'm trying to think, but it's like usually they're not in as open space. It doesn't feel, and again the scenery and the environment's really cool as well. Uh, so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Season of the Deep, its story, how it's ended, where it's going. Obviously, story-wise, we'll learn more at the final shape reveal on August 22nd, and that'll be when the next season starts. And hopefully, from that point on, the story is going to be, kicked right into action. And yeah, I mean, speaking of sort of the story being kicked into action, I want to talk about kind of my thoughts and my previous predictions on Season of the Deep. So basically, a few weeks ago, I think it was a couple of months ago, a month and a half ago or so, I basically put together a really long and extensive article on how or why I think, or how, I mean, either way, basically why I think or why I thought Season of the Deep was going to, quote, realign the narrative. And I put like a bunch of predictions in there, and I kind of think that I don't know if I got it all right in terms of like, because I was speaking more from like a development point of view and from my understanding of how Bungie's sort of structure and how things have sort of worked, and I go into all the specifics in that particular article, so you can, I'll link that leave a link in the description so you can check that out. Um, but I've written down a few of my kind of predictions that I sort of made that I want to sort of talk about. It's possible I missed some because I sort of, in planning for this, I was like going through and I found these, but these I think are the sort of the main kind of the main predictions that I made. So I think the first one being obviously the title, Season of the Deep will realign the narrative. Obviously, we can't quite say because we don't know where the story's going in final shape and what we're going to get next season. But based on the fact that they're like, oh yeah, Savathun's coming back, and oh, here's the Witness's Origins cutscene. To me, I mean, that's twice as much as I anticipated. I knew there was something about the Witness's Origins, as I said, based on that Daemon cutscene. I knew there was that, and that had me kind of thinking that, yeah, we're going to be back on track. But the Savathun reveal, that was something I didn't anticipate at all. Uh, and that was, as I said, it was a really cool reveal. And so, while we can't say for certain, I think that it appears that that might be the case. That yes, that Season of the Deep has realigned the narrative, and if that then continues into next season, then we're on a kind of a good path to the final shape in when it releases next year. Then I think that we'll be back in action and back on the story that we probably should have gotten with Lightfall, which obviously Lightfall kind of went off on its own sort of tangent. And part of my prediction with that was that Season of the Deep would have some kind of ending, or some way it would tie into Final Shape and next season. And again, much like I just said, I think that was correct. We can't say for sure because we don't quite know what's in Final Shape. We don't know what's coming next season. But having the Savathun reveal and the Witness's Origins cutscenes feels like the story is much more kind of tied into like, yes, this is where Destiny is obviously heading. This is where, with Witch Queen, Bungie clearly had this planned out, where with the Witness reveal and all that. It is interesting seeing the mention of the Veil inside of that Witness's Origins cutscene, but it's much like I said in this article. Maybe not everything will line up with my prediction, because the fact is that when they announced that extra expansion, they did so a year before Witch Queen, which meant it was 2 years before Lightfall, and then 3 years before Final Shape. So, whilst I believe that something happened in development that obviously had they had a development shift and they had to move things around, again, as I go into in that article, it's not that I'm totally wrong. It's just that they've had to move things around. Like, otherwise they are going to have these elements and these parts of the story that are just hanging there, being like, not being spoken about. And so they're going to have to integrate them, and that's kind of part of the work they're having to do this year, is trying to integrate things like the Veil and explain it more, so that people understand what it is. And that's what Lightfall should have done, but of course it didn't. And again, a lot of people were saying, oh, that cutscene we just got should have been in Lightfall, and I agree that information should have been in Lightfall, but then it's like, but if that information was in Lightfall, what would we have gotten this season? And that to me just shows that my whole prediction, a lot of it revolves around the fact that Bungie did so well with Witch Queen and it was so well structured and planned out. How did this kind of derail and go into what we got with Lightfall? And I even think Year 5, last year's seasons, kind of suffered as a result. Specifically, Season of the Haunted and Plunder, because they were setting up Lightfall, which of course, again, if that was never planned and that was never where the story was intended to go, it wasn't, it didn't really ever exist in that form. And that applies to Season of Defiance this year as well, because obviously if Lightfall wasn't going to exist, then Season of Defiance wouldn't have existed either. And obviously Lightfall has always existed by name, but the content and the narrative kind of content probably was moved to Final Shape. And I don't think that's not wrong to say, because that just makes total sense. It's like, if you're adding another chapter into the story, you either felt that your ending wasn't satisfying enough and you decided to extend it, or you felt that you needed more time for whatever reason, whether to tell the story or for development's sake, and so you added another chapter, quote unquote, after, but actually you were adding it before, but you were keeping the name of that existing expansion to tie in to be for that new content, while you had this new name for the old content. It's a bit of a confusing Very very confusing, honestly overall. But that's kind of my sort of guess. But yeah, so back to my sort of predictions. Obviously, in sort of tying in with that, my whole theory was that, right, if Lightfall, specifically the content of Lightfall, if narratively that was filler because they were trying to buy more time or whatever, or that was added in late, then you don't just add one expansion to kind of, when Bungie say, oh, we're going to do an extra expansion, they're not just adding an extra expansion, they're actually adding 4 seasons along with it as well, because they have to then put together an entire year's worth of content. And so if that was the case, if Lightfall was filler, then that would seemingly mean that there would be 4 filler seasons. And my prediction was that Season of the Deep wouldn't be a filler season; it would be season 21 and 22, that being this current season and next season, that would be the originally intended seasons, because that would then tie into the expansion reveal, and then the last season of the year would be the last filler sort of season. But then in seeing this season, I'm kind of questioning, because it didn't have much going on for the first 4 weeks. I'm like, wait, so maybe this was a filler season, but then you have the ending, so I'm like, oh, maybe not. Um, it ultimately depends where the story is going to go in the next 2 seasons. So this one's kind of one of those where it's like you can't quite answer it right now. Um, it's possible that this season isn't a filler season because they've kind of got out the main story bits that they had intended. But then, because it ties into the Veil and because it ties into some of the stuff that probably should have been in Lightfall, that again to me suggests, oh, maybe it's filler. So it's weird, honestly. It's kind of weird. I actually think, to some extent, that the Savathun reveal and the Witness kind of Origins cutscene, that could have been like a way that's like, Bungie needed some big kind of they need some kind of big reveal and big sort of ending to kind of get people back into the meat of things, kind of thing. Uh, so yeah, as I said, I think some of those, those are kind of difficult to sort of predict. But I do think my core prediction, at least, that the narrative that this season would realign the narrative, might have been pretty much bang on. It obviously just depends where next season goes, and obviously we will see where things go from here. And so, moving on from that, let's talk about what was recently discussed, both in the This Week in Destiny blog post, as well as the Bungie Day Festival that's going on, but we'll get to that a bit later. First, we'll talk about the server and stability issues, and the sort of what Bungie's just recently sort of explained about their plans. And so, to kind of get people up to speed, if you didn't know, I mean, if you play Destiny, you probably do know, but there's been a lot of server and matchmaking issues in Destiny, which has led to a lot of emergency and extended downtimes that Bungie have had to do, and it's obviously become quite a hot topic within the community. And so, just recently, or last Thursday at the time of recording, well, I'll say, yeah, last Thursday, Bungie basically came out, their engineering team sort of came out and explained kind of the reasoning behind those issues, as well as the kind of changes they've got planned to kind of address these problems. And so the main point they sort of get at, the sort of what they refer to a key service called claims, that basically receives gameplay messages. And in Bungie's words, this means, well, as they say, quote, this means claims handles a tremendous amount of volume, routing every single kill, orb, or unit of glimmer in Destiny 2 to the correct recipient, end quote. And following on from that, they also say, quote, ahead of Lightfall's launch, a few improvements were made to the claims service. We made updates to some of its underlying communication technology and made changes that allowed claims to scale out to more servers so that during moments or events of high concurrency, the service could make use of those extra resources and avoid getting bogged down. While the updates achieved our scale goals, we discovered issues around the service's error recover functionality. And so that's end quote. And so then they sort of go on to basically say that if Claims has its communication channels disrupted, or it's supposed to automatically restore those connections, and disruptions can include things like hardware failures, network hitches, or problems with the other services, as they say. And the team goes on to say that if those services are permanently disrupted, it's why players will be running into those error codes, like Weasel and Baboon and whatever else. And then, as they go on to say here, quote, in these cases, even a rolling restart of our claim service is not always enough to restore the service. Instead, a full restart of our Destiny 2 services must be performed to restore the claim system, which we are rapidly working to correct. End quote. And then following on from that, they then say, quote, fixing these claims issues is the very top priority of our services organization right now, but we must do it very carefully. Done incorrectly, we could unintentionally make stability for players worse or create new issues. This is not a process that can happen overnight, and we must make sure, as we make these fixes, we guarantee that your gameplay messages get routed reliably so that your Destiny 2 experience remains smooth and stable, end quote. And so yeah, I mean, both that and what I'm about to say is going to be a lot of reading and quoting from Bungie, because what they say after this is that they basically then lay out a bunch of upcoming changes to the claim service. And it's very confusing, so there's a lot of techno, high tech sort of complex sort of stuff. If it doesn't make sense, fair enough. It's kind of I sort of understand the general idea of what they've just sort of said here, what they said, what I've just read. But this next bit is obviously the set of changes that they're planning to make going forward, and so the changes they're going to be, making just ongoing in the background constantly. They say, quote, we will continue to make improvements to our production and deployment processes to reduce the risk of disruptions for players while reducing our maintenance and deployment downtime windows. We will also be constantly improving our response procedures for incident recovery to bring Destiny 2 back online as quickly as possible when incidents occur. This work has been ongoing and will continue throughout this timeline. End quote. And so that's obviously just going to be what they're going to be working on like constantly. There's not going to that's just going to be a never-ending thing essentially. But coming in the mid-season 21 patch, which is update 7.1.5, which I'm guessing will arrive alongside Solstice, so that'll be on the, as far as we are sorry, well, I don't know if it's confirmed, but I think that's on the 18th of July is when Solstice is, so I assume that's when the mid-season patch will also go into the game. And so the changes that are coming then, they say, quote, we will make targeted improvements to our logging and alerting systems, allowing us to diagnose issues more quickly with claims and related systems. These changes are designed to minimize the risk of further degrading stability, while helping us to confirm the effectiveness of fixes further out in the roadmap, end quote. And then a bit further out, alongside the launch of Season 22, which is update 7.2.0, which is on August 22nd, that'll be the same day the final shape reveal, like showcase and everything is, and whatever the season's called, they're basically going to be making even more changes, and this is, I think, the biggest batch of changes they're making all at once. And they say, quote, we are deploying a large set of improvements meant to improve the, quote, self-healing ability of claims and reduce the odds of us needing to bring Destiny 2 temporarily offline when an issue occurs. We are adding functionality for services to detect claims services that are in an unhealthy state and send their messages to healthy services instead. We are additionally making 6 targeted fixes to claim systems where we've identified issues that could impact claim stability or recovery. We are making an improvement to better evict old gameplay messages in our pipelines, which should help faster recoveries and reduce the chance of a death spiral or slow messages, of slow messages causing more slow messages. We are also deploying improvements that will help us make Destiny 2 services even more robust in the future. We are adding improved support for targeted chaos testing against our services, allowing us to better simulate different failure modes for our services. We are adding more logging for non-claims portions of our messaging pipelines to detect other issues that could lead to connection problems for players. And finally, to reduce the odds of introducing new problems with these changes, we are also updating and expanding our claims unit tests. This is an automated testing that verifies code is behaving the way we expect it should. And so this is, as it's basically, these are all done to, obviously end quote, obviously. Yeah, these are obviously all things they're going to be doing to sort of help, I guess, improve server stability. And then I think the last couple of things they say here is that for the Season 23 launch, which I assume will be late November, Decemberish time, that Season 23 launch, which is update 7.3.0, they say, quote, based on the results of our 7.2.0 updates and improved logging, we will be targeting deeper and broader architectural improvements to improve the server stability and rapid recovery of Destiny 2, which will include a range of additional improvements, end quote. And so yeah, that sounds like it's going to be maybe a bigger sweep of things to kind of further improve, and obviously we'll see how things go, and of course they might lead to more server stability, or instability even, which is what they say here. And so as a final note, Bungie says, quote, some of these changes will be structural in nature and could introduce additional instability as we initially roll them out. As always, we will work to minimize the risk with deep testing and around-the-clock monitoring, and will implement the most appropriate response needed to get everyone back online as quickly as possible when instability occurs. Our goal is to give Destiny 2 players the best possible experience, and we look forward to seeing the results of the work we've been doing since Lifeforce launched to improve stability. Thank you for your patience and feedback as we work towards achieving the milestones above." End quote. So yeah, there's not really a lot I can say, because obviously a lot of it is technical jargon and whatever, but essentially it just sounds like a lot of overloading of information kind of thing, and a lot of things, and if something goes wrong, that then causes like a sort of chain reaction of other problems, and then it just kind of spirals, like they say, a death spiral, kind of just goes out of control, and so then that's obviously what's happening, why it's causing all the downtimes, and I think that's why they were saying that, these emergency maintenances are basically needed, because they need to take the game down so that they can stop messages coming in, so that they can just kind of properly get everything back online. And to be fair, when they do the emergency maintenances, it seems like it only takes about an hour to come back online. So it seems a bit rocky right now, but obviously, hopefully, with these changes, things are going to become a lot smoother. But yeah, I think it's really cool, honestly, hearing behind the scenes information, and I think it was obviously warranted here. I know that some people out there were sort of complaining it was too complex, and I imagine most probably didn't need this like super technical deep dive, but personally, and I think most people that are invested into this game actually do really appreciate this kind of stuff, and I actually wish we got more of it. Even if it's not necessarily relevant to what's going on in the game, just learning more about the infrastructure and the way it's built and why things are happening, and just kind of understanding, because it's like the game. So this was posted last Thursday, and then the game had some issues last night, and it previously it'd been like, oh no, not again. But when I saw that, it's like, oh, it's a bit frustrating, but because we know the likely reason behind it, and we've been given this roadmap of changes, it's kind of like one of those guys, yeah, okay, just kind of have to just get through the rough part right now, and then it'll get better. And it's not every day, but it is nearly every couple of days, or every week at least, that this seems to be happening. And that's kind of that was the server instability was kind of one aspect of the game that's kind of been affecting the quite a lot of things. And it's obviously the servers are the core of the game, and that kind of leads me on to sort of what I want to talk about briefly next, which is the state of the game right now. I'm not going to speak too long about this now, because I spent another hour talking about it in a video, an article last week, I think it was, and the issues there are, it's kind of more to do with, it's not just service instability, but it's things like PvP, the story, since last year, and kind of with Lightfall, and then recently because of a video that Aztecross put out talking about monetization as well. And there's other things people complain about and have problems with, like the seasonal structure, which again, that's why I said earlier, it's like I don't think the seasonal structure is necessarily as terrible as people make it out to be. I understand maybe people getting bored of it and burnt out, and it's very similar in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I feel like Bungie done a pretty decent job, especially this season, of kind of freshening things up, even if a lot of the key elements are still there. I think things feel like they play a lot better. I don't feel like I'm having to play as much as I usually do, in certain regards, like with the seasonal challenges to get all the upgrades on the grid and stuff. It feels like it's actually pretty natural, and more targeted to get those upgrades, with the sort of the other seasonal challenges they've got. And yeah, obviously, I'm hoping that PvP is going to get a better look at, particularly with Final Shape onwards. That's honestly my biggest personal problem. Even if I don't play PvP that much, I feel like that's probably the biggest problem with the game, other than the servers right now. And we've been addressed on that, so hopefully PvP is going to get the love it deserves soon. And I actually think, in terms of the story, I think we're already, again, as I've discussed, I think the story is getting there, and that's kind of started with the season. So hopefully that'll continue. And monetization, I feel like will probably stay the same, honestly. Maybe besides a few kind of adjustments, which I'm personally hoping for a couple, which I also outlined in that video last week. I won't kind of belabor the point here, but things like unlimited transmog, or Bright Ingram sort of being a lot more generous than just giving you random items from like 1,000 or whatever items there are. So yeah, that's all I'll talk about the state of the game. As I said, I did a whole video on that can kind of talk about that. But I do think that, as I said, PvP is that real. The PvP is the one I'm just like, if Bungie comes out and like announces that they're gonna have like 3 new maps next year, or maybe 3 new maps with Final Shape, and they're gonna have another 2 coming through the seasons, and they have like a new mode with Final Shape, that'll be awesome. I just don't think it's gonna happen, and it's really frustrating as well. There was actually I won't speak upon what was in it because I don't. I think it was wrong, but there was a leak people were talking about just the other day, a paste bin leak that was just like everything everyone wants all in one, and it was like, man, this like it made Destiny sound so cool. Um, and it's like everything people want, so it's like, man, this would be amazing, but it's not gonna happen. um, yeah, and so next I'm going to talk about just kind of wrapping things up, getting towards the end, getting through a few more things here. Talking about some upcoming events and the exotic quest that seems like it's going to be happening at some point, probably. And so we've got first up is Iron Banner next week on the 11th of July, which I actually haven't played. Well, I played a bit of Iron Banner this season, but not very much. I need to go and get the emblem. I still need to get the armor pieces on the other two classes. I play mainly Hunter. I need to kind of, or maybe I did get the armor sets actually. I can't remember, but yeah, I think I need to do that. Um, I would like to get the Strand Fusion Rifle. I actually think it's so cool they did a Strand Fusion Rifle. I like how they're pumping out a lot of Strand weapons compared to Stasis, which took like an entire year nearly to get. Wait, no, sorry, tell a lie. It was, what was it? November 2020, and then it was August 2021. I think when they added the first three Stasis weapons, but still, that's really bad, honestly. I think, but they've done really awesome with like these Strand weapons coming out like straight away. We've got probably like 15, 20 or something, like 10, 15 or something already in 2 seasons worth. Very cool, including some exotics as well. And yeah, and then on the 18th of July, seemingly that's when Solstice is going to be arriving alongside, when I assume anyway, the mid-season patch will be. Not that that's confirmed just yet, but that's just a guess. Usually that's what happens with the... well, I think it usually happens with a lot of events. Guardian Games works differently, but I think Solstice, Festival of the Lost, and Dawning, I believe, all work. No, not so much Dawning's... It's weird. Dawning's early on in the season, usually. Guardian Games are right at the end of the season, but Solstice and Festival are kind of in the middle of the season, I think. So I assume, yeah, 18th of July is probably when the mid-season patch will come out. I can't actually remember what's coming in that patch, but I would imagine if that's coming, they will be talking about it this coming week or next week. It's possible we'll have a Wednesday blog post as well, actually coming this week or next week, if that's what their plan is. I think they said they're going to be something like that. And yeah, and of course, there's at some point a potential exotic quest that is seemingly tied in with fishing. I don't know if that's because that's been data mined or not, but basically, when you collect an exotic fish from one of the, I don't know if you can get all of them at the moment, but I know you can get. I know I've got one from Savathun's Throne World, and I got the other one from Nessus. And you basically bank those on board the aquarium, or at the aquarium on board the helm, and that gives you like an exotic blade thing that basically you have to find a sort of specific statue in sort of deep dives to go and you sort of like activate it. You get like a line of dialogue from Zivu or Wrath, and then that's it done, I guess. I don't think there's anything more that kind of I think that obviously the sort of statue, the sort of hive statue, whatever, it sort of lights up, gives you an idea that you've done it, alongside that sort of dialogue from Zivu, but that's about it. And so something that you might have seen as I experienced, I basically went in, got the statue, was like, okay, let's carry on, finish a deep dive, and I was thinking about leaving, but I was like, no, I'll carry on. It seemed like the other two players they weren't, and they both left as well. So I got to like the next section of deep dives, and then suddenly there was no one there. I was like, oh, okay, right, I guess I might as well leave then. The following time, though, the following deep dive run where I got my other statue, no one left, so I got to finish that, and that was cool. And I think I got to see the higher difficulty tier, which was actually the first time, because again, no one wants to interact with the Toland buff as well. But speaking of fishing, kind of tying into sort of the next topic is basically next week. Oh, sorry, tell a lie. This week, starting tomorrow at the time of recording, the 4th of July. Well, Bungie Day is on the 7th of July. I don't know if we're going to get anything news-wise with that. We'll have to see. I think we sometimes have. Usually we've gotten like, I think in the past we have gotten like, oh, here's when the showcase is, but we already know when the showcase is. Plus we I think that's already like, it's pretty much a given. We know when the showcase is now. There's no kind of like, no, it's never kind of vague. It used to be kind of vague and saying like, oh, cool, like, time to get excited, but we always know when it's going to be now. Yeah, so I don't know if there'll be any news with that. But yeah, we've got Bungie Day then, so who knows what might come there. But this week, sort of as part of that, they're adding a buff called Lucky Week or something, or but they're making like a basically increasing the drop rate of exotic fish, and that's what they say here. They say in the most recent This Week in Destiny blog post, they say, quote, starting a reset on Tuesday, 4th of July, as part of our Bungie Day celebrations, we will have a new fishing perk, Lucky Week. What does that mean exactly? Well, for 1 week, Nessus, the EDZ, and Throne World will have a bonus that doubles the exotic fish catch rate, end quote. And so basically, if you want to go and get your exotic fish, whether for collection purposes, or for triumphs completions, or this quest, or whatever you want to go on, this week is seemingly going to be a good time to like jump in and get that. And I got mine done already, so I might be taking part in this. I'm also just caught up in Final Fantasy 16 right now. I'm kind of very focused on that, and I've kind of said to myself I'm probably not going to play too much Destiny until Solstice, but then I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, I need to get Iron Banner, the Fusion Rifle, so probably next Tuesday's when I'll play, so it might even start this week if I want to jump in a little bit to get some fish. I'll be playing tomorrow at Reset anyway, just at least to see what the Veil Containment Lightfall lore is. But also I wanted to sort of talk about several blog posts I think Bungie call out in this blog post, I'm not sure, but they put out a blog post about the Bungie Day Giving Festival soon, which is a fundraiser they're doing for Bungie Day. And they say, quote, the campaign runs from July 6th to July 23rd with a full schedule of featured streamers, a special community competition, awards for our top fundraisers, and a whole week full of prizes, end quote. And basically, yeah, there's a ton of things to just like earn, and you can potentially win in and out of the game. I just wanted to sort of talk a couple of things. Obviously, I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check out the sort of both for the This Week in Destiny blog post and this Bungie Day Giving Festival for 2023. One thing I wanted to call out is that they've obviously since being bought by PlayStation. I don't actually know if they did this last year. Maybe they did. But they've basically said that the top 10 fundraisers can choose to receive a code from one of the following games. So you can basically, if you're one of the top 10 fundraisers, you can pick you can get a code for either Last of Us Part 1 or Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Gran Turismo 7, or Returnal. I think that's pretty cool. You can actually also win you can get a marathon shirt when you donate $1,777, which has a unique 0777 number on the back. And as well as that, the top 25 fundraisers will also get a limited edition marathon shirt. And what's also new for this year is that they're adding like a lifetime goal. If you've donated so much, if you hit like these certain thresholds, you get an extra reward. And so if you've donated $25,000 overall, you get the Mediastinum emblem and the Principled Porphyry shader, Porphyry, something like that. So basically, you're getting an emblem and a shader depending on each of these thresholds. And if you get 50,000 donated, you get the Vene Cave emblem and the Hearts of Gold shader. And then if you donate a total 100, and this counts for all the years, by the way. So if you donated like money before and you're donating this year or whatever, you can get all these. It adds up. If you've donated $100,000 overall, you get the Cordula emblem and the Argent Champion shader. But there are a lot of different things going on during this week, so it's worth checking them out. And as I said, I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go straight to the page and check it all out. And so I wanted to talk about this next thing, which this is, I guess it's possible spoilers, kind of. But obviously we know a raid is coming back next season in Destiny. We have no idea which one. There have been a lot of speculation, many rumors, but we don't currently know. And I assume obviously we'll find out at the showcase. And it's this again. If this was like a really like hidden away piece of leak, I wouldn't talk about it. But there has been sort of speculation and people talking. It sounds like Wrath of the Machine is not going to be the raid that's returning, but Crota's End might be the raid that's returning, which I think will be really interesting to see. I would have liked Wrath probably more, but I am curious to see what happens with Crota. I do think that not only it'll be interesting to see what they do to kind of bring Crota's End up to current standards, or to try and make it more of a challenging raid. I mean, I say that, but I would also really like it if they kept like the solo challenge in there, or like being able to like run it solo. I always thought that was fun in Destiny 1. Though I don't. No, I think you would technically still be able to do it if they kept it the same because of the sword that you get to swing across the gap. But plus we have Strand now as well, actually. Um, but yeah, I think this is actually quite cool because we already have Oryx in the game via Kingsfall, and obviously you find his body at the end of Ghost of the Deep Dungeon. Savathun has the Witch Queen expansion, and Zivu Arath is now in the story. So I think this would actually be a really nice way to sort of tie them all together. But as I said, this is just a kind of, I say a leak, but I don't actually know where the source this is from. I don't know if it's real. Uh, a lot of people have just been talking about it recently, sort of here and there, sort of on different streams and on Twitter and whatever else. So, which I think is the speculation anyway. There's a lot of speculation going on. I try and avoid a lot of these leaks now and again. It depends what it is. If to be honest, the leaks I'm most interested in are feature leaks. Like what does the future look like, kind of thing. I don't want to know story. I don't want to know anything like that. But I am curious to know, what kind of features are sort of upcoming essentially, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm most curious about. But yeah, as I said, I also don't want to delve too much into like let's discuss leaks because I don't really want to. I actually find it quite a bit. I find it a little bit frustrating when there's like people that are kind of like actively searching for leaks or actively like posting leaks, kind of thing. Especially story related leaks. I find that they're the most egregious. As I said, I think fair enough on certain features. I know some people don't want to know what's coming at all, but it's more like, for example, like with the state of PvP right now, like I'd really want to know if there's anything planned for PvP. Help set expectations, but I don't want to know like, oh, such and such is going to happen. This is going to happen in final shape or whatever. It's like that stuff is like I don't want to know that at all, and that's a testament to Bungie's story. It's gotten so good that I'm just like I don't want to know anything. But yeah, it'll be cool if Crota comes back, and that's something obviously that will be we'll see about in due time, I guess. And as I said, who knows? Who knows what will come and whether I know that's because that's the thing. Part of it was the speculation about whether a Destiny 2 raid would come back as well. Whether they're going to bring one of those. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's great because we're getting content back in the game." But my view is, it's like, well, they set the expectation is it's a Destiny 1 raid. That's what they've done 2 times in a row. I understand. I'm not saying don't bring back any of those Destiny 2 raids, but it doesn't have the same weight as a Destiny 1 raid. Especially if we already played it in Destiny 2, having Destiny 1 content come forward and it be playable is something that that's the expectation, and I think that's what most people actually want. So it'll be interesting to see. And so yeah, that kind of wraps up everything that I had planned to talk about for this episode. It's episode 1 of the Untitled Destiny podcast. I'll be searching for a name, but this is pretty much just an experiment I wanted to try, and so specifically focusing on being a podcast, which is kind of what a lot of my YouTube kind of quote unquote videos, like my content is. It's very much just like, oh, it's just an image and just talking, and even if it's not, it's a lot of it's unscripted. I wouldn't mind trying out some more scripted stuff at some point, but I find a bit of difficulty doing that. It's kind of just because I feel like it sounds too scripted. I wanted to get in a sort of I want it to sound like, obviously, it's, I'm sure you can tell when it is and isn't scripted, obviously, but I want it to sound a little bit more conversationalist and sounds like it flows a little bit better, so it isn't just like I'm reading directly from a script. And I think it's fine when you're quoting stuff, but as soon as you're like having an entire video of it, it sounds, you must see through it straight away, which you need a bit of a facade to sort of hide that. And so if I continue this, which obviously I'd like to, the next episode will be 2 weeks from today. This should go up on the 3rd of July, so it should be on the 17th of July that the next episode is. If we're aiming for every 2 weeks. The only issue is that Solstice releases on the Tuesday, and I'm considering, unless there's like a bunch to talk about, which I don't know. I'm not. It's kind of like one of those I'm just gonna have to sort of figure out. If there's tons to talk about, then maybe I will just do it. But if not, I'm considering like rescheduling it for the Wednesday of that week. So that would be on the 19th, I think. That way I can sort of play a bit of Solstice on the Tuesday sort of evening, and then kind of get up on the Wednesday and kind of like discuss a few like early thoughts on Solstice, along with like whatever else has come recently before that. So I'll just figure that out when it's kind of close to the time, just to kind of see how I feel. And obviously, this podcast is going to be, I say every 2 weeks for this because next week I'm sort of thinking of trying to do a more generalized sort of games focused podcast that kind of talks about what I've been playing, that then, maybe what else is going on news wise. Uh, and then basically I can sort of, that's where I can talk about other stuff that isn't Destiny, and so the Destiny stuff exists here, and then the non-Destiny stuff, everything else stays over there, and I think as time goes on, we'll just kind of like move it around. Maybe Monday's a bad day to post this because then you don't get the, you kind of miss out on the reset the following day and then the blog post for the week, but then you could say the same for Friday because you're close to the, I don't know, it's kind of figuring out the schedule, and Monday kind of works okay, I think, for me, and I like the idea of just kind of, going games on Monday and just being like, this is, something I'll be working on, and then kind of gives me like a simple start for the week, and then I can work on something more scripted or focused for later on in the week, and that's kind of my but it's all up in the air. Who knows where it's going to go? This might be the only episode, and it might be a unique episode, and this is what we'll talk about. But I think this format's been cool. It's been interesting, kind of putting together all the bit of all the news we've gotten. Uh, I guess I should have gone back to, well, I kind of I went 2 weeks back in terms of the story, but I didn't go 2 weeks back in terms of the blog post. But if I remember rightly, the the most recent This Week in Destiny blog post had obviously all the server information on it and a bit of extra other information, but the previous one before that was like the shortest one we've gotten in I don't know how long, maybe shortest ever. Um, which I don't quite understand why. I don't know if there was, I guess there's just nothing to talk about really, but that seems weird considering the state of the game. But anyway, we've got something this week or last week just now, last Thursday, and we'll see what we might get later this week. See where things go, and as I said, well, by the time the next episode rolls around, we'll have 2 blog posts to talk about if there's anything in there worth sort of discussing. We'll potentially have Solstice to talk about if I plan to record this podcast after Solstice. And maybe we'll have a Wednesday blog post as well because we might have the mid-season patch by that point as well. So and I don't know if Bungie, and yeah, maybe if Bungie Day has anything extra for the final shape, who knows? But yeah, otherwise, that'll be it. All the links you want, hopefully you want anyway, are in the description. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, go there. You can also check out my State of Destiny 2 podcast, sort of video, not really video, but more podcast, and article that'll be in the description, as well as my Season of the Deep prediction article that I put together a couple of months ago. Yeah, and until next time, enjoy Lucky Week fishing, or whatever else you're playing, and I'll see you then. Again, leave all your feedback and everything else in the comments, and I will read through and see what you all think. And yeah, so until next time, have a good one, and ciao, ciao, ciao.